Nancy did not arrive in a fairy tale. She arrived in the thunder of drums and moonlight, the night a fisherman's son met a shy girl at the Asakoro festival. Jacob was young, afro, bright smile, the confidence of someone who knew the river by heart. Amara was softer, tall, graceful, a quiet light. They danced that night until the music thinned into laughter and promises. Love came too fast for the world around them. When Amara's belly began to show, her uncle's anger cracked the house like lightning. He dragged her to Jacob's door with a verdict and no blessing. Nancy was born into that small, hopeful home. 2 years later, on a rain-swollen evening, Amara labored with a second child. Thunder pressed its face against the windows. Little Nancy watched her father dash through the storm and scoop her into warmth. Soap, towel, the scent of smoke from a cooking fire. He kissed her forehead and said he'd be back in the morning. A neighbor woman took Nancy by the hand and led her to her grandmother's compound just for 2 nights. Morning came. Nancy sat at the gate with hair still damp from her bath, waiting for her father. Noon. Dusk. Another day. She stood at the gate again, tiny fingers wrapped around the rusted bars. The woman who looked like her mother, but older, bathed her, fed her, hushed her. Her father did not come the next day, or the next. What began as 2 nights stretched into 8 years. Grandmother's house smelled of firewood and palm spirit. Chickens pecked at the yard. Plastic drums lined the wall. Her grandmother was strict, busy, and, when business demanded, absent. One afternoon when Nancy was 7, fever clung to her skin. Grandmother handed a packet of pills to the maid with quick instructions and left to tend to her trade. Nancy hated medicine. She tucked the tablets under her tongue, opened her mouth when asked, and later slipped them behind the old fridge. When general cleaning day came, the maid found the hoarded pills and a lie. "Do you know what medicine costs?" the maid hissed, eyes sharp with power. Nancy's apology tumbled out, small and shaking. "Please, don't tell Grandma. Please." What followed wasn't protection. It was exploitation. The maid used Nancy's fear to coerce her into acts a child should never be taught. She named it a game. She named it a secret. She said it would keep Nancy safe from trouble. Nancy, terrified of punishment and desperate to belong to someone, obeyed. A seed was sown, a twisted lesson that closeness and control were the same thing. At school, Nancy carried that seed like a script she did not understand. She repeated what she had seen, seeking approval, mistaking other children's reactions for connection. She never allowed anyone to touch her. She would act. She would control. She would not be the small, powerless girl again. When her grandmother's eyes clouded with sudden blindness, they moved to Port Harcourt. The city was loud and fast and English-heavy. Nancy's silence grew. Kids laughed at her attempts to speak. She stopped trying, shrinking into corners of classrooms and walkways. Kayamika found her there, a girl with a gentle forehead kiss and extra food in her bag. "I'll be your friend," she said, simple as water. At first, Nancy refused the food, suspicious of kindness, but hunger and loneliness pulled her into the orbit of this stubborn tenderness. Kayamika had her own absences, a father missing, a mother working late, a neighbor who had crossed lines. In that private ache, the girls met. Their friendship held warmth and confusion both. Nancy kept the old rule: she would not be touched. But she reenacted the script she knew, initiating what she believed was the only way to be wanted, while denying herself the vulnerability of being held. Church came like a doorway of light. Deeper Life Bible Church. Hymns in the morning, messages in the afternoon, prayers in the evening. Faithful, a kind older girl, took Nancy along for evangelism and choir practice. In December, they all traveled to the retreat grounds. Canopies like white sails, long lines for meals, dorms of narrow bunks, night air stitched with whispered prayers. That's where Nancy met Nina, Faithful's older cousin. Nina was 22, full-bodied confidence, a smile that knew more than it said. One night, Nancy woke to Nina's hand where it should not be. The old panic split open, but the child in Nancy had grown a different defense. She pulled Nina's hand away and took control, repeating the only power she'd ever known: act first, don't be acted upon. After, Nancy turned her face to the wall and willed herself to stone. Come morning, she pretended nothing had happened. Nina didn't. She hovered. She lingered. The retreat bathrooms were not innocent either. Whispers passed, hands straight. Girls carried private storms under white wrappers. Nancy watched and felt sick. At them, at herself, at the way darkness could hide under a canopy of worship songs. Does God love this version of me? She wondered. Do my parents even remember that I exist? At 17, in a small city room with a humming plastic fan and a cracked mirror, Nancy saw a stranger looking back. Her eyes were Amara's. Her height was Jacob's. But her heart was a survivor's, beaten into a confusing shape and still beating anyway. She went to church not because Faithful asked or her grandmother insisted. She went because she needed a different script. The sermon was on forgiveness, but not the cheap kind that erases harm. It spoke about laying down what you were never meant to carry, about becoming more than the worst things done to you or by you. That night, Nancy opened a journal she had kept since 12. Empty pages mostly, scattered with small drawings and short prayers. She wrote, Dear Mommy and Daddy, you never came back. I don't know why. I have been angry. I have been lost. I want to stop being what happened to me. I want to become who I'm meant to be. She didn't feel holy. She didn't glow. But she wept like someone opening a window in a hot, closed room. The next morning, she made a decision without fanfare. She would stop using other people to keep from feeling alone. She would learn boundaries. She would ask for help. She would let herself be helped. Healing did not move in a straight line. Nancy flinched when people hugged her. She skipped church some weeks. She sat on her bed on some mornings and stared at the journal like it might write itself. But she kept going. She found an older woman at church willing to listen without prying. She learned how to name what had happened to her as abuse, not shame. She apologized where she could, without reopening wounds. She forgave herself on the days she faltered. At a youth small group, the leader invited stories. The room fell into that heavy silence where secrets live. Nancy looked down at her hands and decided not to be made of stone. She spoke, halting at first, then steady, not details, just truth. A childhood awaiting at a gate, a house that became a marketplace of needs, a script that hurt her and others, a girl who wanted a different ending. Someone across the circle whispered, Me too, and the hush broke into soft, shared tears. The leader prayed, not to erase what happened, but to bless what could yet be. Wordlessly, Nancy began to help. She didn't call herself a counselor. She just sat with younger girls who had that same hollow look she remembered from mirrors. She told them that waiting at a gate doesn't mean no one is coming. Sometimes it means you are the one who must learn to move. She taught them the words she'd learned. No, stop, I need help. This is not my fault. She learned new words too. I am loved. I am becoming. I am allowed to heal. On a quiet morning months later, sunlight slipped through flimsy curtains and painted a bright stripe across her mirror. Nancy braided her hair with slow care. She pinned a small verse beside the glass, a reminder she chose for herself, not one forced upon her. She smiled, not the dazzling grin of a movie ending. A small, honest smile that said, I'm still here. I'm still trying. I'm still becoming. Some days, she still thought about Jacob's promise in the rain, about Amara's eyes, soft and scared, about the neighbor woman, and the maid and Nina, and every door that should have stayed shut. But those thoughts no longer ruled her. They were rooms she could visit and then leave. Walking to church, she passed a group of little girls skipping rope, beads clicking in their hair. One tripped and laughed, brushing dust from her knees. Nancy laughed too, out loud, free. She kept walking, hand on the strap of her bag, the weight easy. This was not a story that pretended pain never happened. It was a story about a girl who learned that survival can become healing, and healing can become hope. It was a story about Nancy's silence turning into Nancy's voice. And it was only the beginning.